Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, we are heading into project number 5 of my Procreate holiday greeting series. What you see on screen is exactly what we're going to be creating together. We're actually only using 3 types of brushes in this tutorial and all of them are free. So they are my signature brush, my mono weight brush, and then all the snowflakes are part of my free snowflake stamp brush set. So I'll leave links to all of those right in the video description, and the color palette is free as always. So just tap on the link right in the video description. You can have access to all of those. So I'm going to start this project with a canvas that is 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels at 300 DPI. I am working in the display P3 color profile, but if you're on an older iPad and don't have access to that color profile, then the default sRGB color profile is perfectly fine. Okay, I've got my canvas all ready to go, and the first thing we're going to do is set our background color. So come to your layers, hit background color, and hopefully you've already loaded in your color palette. We're working with a bunch of different colors for this project, and our background color is going to be this very first one up at the top. Let's return to our layers to make sure we're on layer 1. We're going to switch our color to the third one on the second row. It's this light green color, and that's going to be our lettering. I'm going to grab my signature brush. If you've checked out my new free course, Procreate 5X for Beginners, I'll leave a link right in the video description and on screen to that. Then you'll already have the starter pack loaded in, and the mono weight brush and the signature brush are already part of that. So you'll already have those. So I've got my signature brush selected, and all I'm going to do is write out my holiday phrase. So feel free to pick any phrase that you would like and draw it out right in the center. Okay, once you have your lettering, I'm going to center this up. So select it with your cursor and you can just drag it. And if you have uniform down here with snapping toggled on over here, then as you drag it, you'll see those crosshairs appear, those yellow crosshairs, and that tells me right where the center of my canvas is. I'm going to rotate this one just slightly. I feel like I drew this a little too much at an angle, a little bit more of an angle than I wanted. So that looks good. I do want an angle still, but mine was a little too extreme. So if I toggle this off and then toggle it back on again, it resets my bounding box, so then I can recenter it. So that's a quick little tip. All right, now that I've got that centered, now I can start drawing all of my foliage elements around it. So sometimes when you create lettering, you can have really large elements on one side and really small elements on the other, and it can feel like it's a little unbalanced or visually not centered, even though we know that it is centered. And you can make up for that if you would like, because right now I have this large S, and then I've just got this exit stem of my smaller S, and it's making it seem like there's not as much over here as there is over here, so it's feeling a little too heavy on the left side for me. So even though I know that this is centered, I'm still going to tap it over to the right a little bit, so visually it'll feel centered even though it's not literally centered. So that's feeling more centered to me. And this part's really important because as we start drawing everything around it, we'll know that everything continues to feel balanced. So now that we have our lettering all set, I like creating my largest, most dominant elements first, and then I create all of my supporting elements around it. So for this one, I have these 2 colored leaves. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. Let's label this one lettering. It'll be really important that we stay organized throughout this project because there are a lot of elements. We're going to group elements and we're going to have a lot of layers. So just a heads up before we jump into all of this. So I'm just going to tap anywhere. So my renaming is deselected. I'm going to create a brand new layer right above it. And this one's just going to be medium leaves. So I'm going to draw these in, and the color of these ones are going to be this first green on the second row and the second green on the second row. So I'm going to grab the first one first, and I'm going to grab my mono weight brush for this. My size is 4%, and I'm just going to draw a few leaves around my lettering. Just keep in mind that we have a lot of other elements to go, so you don't want to make them too big, but they're still going to be a dominant element. So they're a decent size, but I'm still accounting for space for other elements here as I'm drawing them. So this one, you could just draw them however you would like. I'm kind of framing around my lettering a little bit. So that's looking like a good start. I'm going to fill these in, and then I'm going to zoom out to make sure everything's still feeling balanced before I continue on. So as I zoom out, it feels like I could use another little leaf over here. And you'll notice I have some that are small and some that are large here, so I like varying up the sizes when I do this as well. Okay, now that we have these elements drawn in, we're going to put in some detail within them just to make everything a little more interesting. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. We'll label this one Leaf Details. I'm going to grab the second green color, and right in the center, I'm going to make like this spiky edge and then continue it on the other side. And this just gives these leaves just a little bit of extra detail. Now that I have the centers or the details of all these leaves completed, I'm going to group these two together because these two layers always belong together. So I can just slide my medium leaves layer over, group these together, and I'm just going to label these medium leaves. The next thing I'm going to add in is one more foreground foliage element, and these ones are going to be really simple and they're brighter colored, so they're going to call attention to themselves because they're in the foreground. And because they're in the foreground and bright, I don't want them to be too large, otherwise they would take too much attention away from my lettering and my composition as a whole. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. These ones are going to be this light blue color, so I'm just going to select that. And these ones are going to be really, really simple because I don't want to draw too much attention to them, but they're still an important element. So these ones are just going to be drawn up and they're just going to be one single leaf shape. And I'm going to draw them overlapping in some areas. So it's really obvious that they're on top of the leaves that I just drew, but I don't want to dominate them necessarily. They're just going to be very obviously in the front, and they're going to vary in size as well. Okay, once again, I'm going to zoom out and just take a look at everything as a whole. It looks like I could use a little something right here. So I'm just going to drop a little leaf right up there. And I think that's looking good. Okay, so let's label this one Blue Leaves. And then I'm going to create a brand new layer right above it. We'll call this one Blue Leaf Details. And this layer we're going to apply a clipping mask to, so whatever we draw on it will be locked into our blue leaf layer. So I'm just going to tap in the layer thumbnail, choose clipping mask. We're going to choose the darker blue color right here up at the top. And all we're going to do for this is going to be really, really simple, is we're going to draw a line up and then close it down here and then fill it in. So it's really, really subtle and simple, but it'll still make everything more interesting this way than just leaving it as one solid color, especially because it's in the foreground of our composition. And you can switch which side you're putting the shadow on, so it looks like we've got light coming from different directions, which can be kind of fun. So I'm just going to come around and do this for each one of these leaves. So let's group these two together. So the blue leaves layer and the blue leaf details layer, toggle it to the right, hit group, and we'll just label this one Blue Leaves. Now we're going to add in some background supporting elements before we build up all the rest of our background elements. So we're going to create some really large holly leaves. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, but I'm going to tap on my lettering layer and put it above my lettering layer. That way, everything we've done beyond the lettering will fall on top of it. It's really important that we get our layer order right here. That way, as we stack all these different elements, it still feels really balanced and as we intend it to look. So I'm going to create a brand new layer by hitting the plus up here. And this one we're just going to label Holly. And the color of our holly is going to be this third green color up at the top. So just choose some spots here and there to put these really large holly leaves. So the holly leaves are drawn like this. They come like this, curve, curve. And then you repeat the exact same thing on the other side. So there's two big points right here. So we're going to keep it really simple. And then I can even just grab it and place it in here. So I'm going to vary up the size a bit, but they're all going to be fairly large because they're holding on to everything that's in front of them. Okay, zoom out again, make sure everything's still feeling balanced, and that looks good to me. So now we can move forward with one last detail on our holly. So create a brand new layer right above the holly layer. Label this one Holly Details. Okay, once again, we're going to apply a clipping mask to this layer. So I'm going to tap on the layer thumbnail, hit clipping mask, and now whatever we draw on this one will get locked into these leaves. So I'm going to grab the darker green. So it's the second one right up at the top. And for this one, it's going to be really basic, and we can actually turn off the visibility temporarily of the medium leaves and the blue leaves, so just uncheck them. That way we can see our holly leaves really well. And on this holly details layer, all you're going to do is draw a line straight through the middle, close it off, remember, because we have to have a closed path, otherwise it'll fill everything, and we don't want to do that. We just want the section filled. And you can alternate which side you have the shadow on if you'd like, but just make sure it's straight down the center each time. We don't want these to be too interesting, but they're going to have a little bit of detail to them. So those are our holly leaves. So let's group those together, the holly details and the holly beneath it. Group, label this one holly. And now we can turn the visibility back on for the medium leaves and the blue leaves. And we can see how all of that looks. And it's really starting to come together now, so we've got a few more elements to pack in there and really bring this to life. So the next thing we're going to do is add another background element that's even darker than the background color. So I'm going to come back here, I'm going to create a brand new layer, but drag it underneath my holly layer because I want this one to definitely be the most furthest back element. This one's going to be called dark leaves, and you could really create any type of leaves that you'd like to back here. I'll show you the style and the shape that I'm going to do, but feel free to do any type of leafy branch that you would like. So let me tap on the screen to deselect that. I'm going to come over here, and it's really hard to see, but there's a fourth color on the second row, and that's the really dark blue color. You can see it right up here in the color circle, and that's the color we're going to use to create these dark leaves. So I like putting these ones in any pockets where it seems like I could use a little something extra. So I'm going to put one right in here, and the shape of these is kind of a curved leaf shape like that, and they're going to be symmetrical on both sides. Okay, now that we have all those background leaf elements completed, we're going to add in some additional background elements, but they're going to be brighter. That way it really draws your eye from the background all the way to the foreground straight to our messaging. For these elements, I'm going to create a brand new layer right above my dark leaves layer. This one is going to be wheat. And these ones are going to be the exact same color that we used for our lettering. So grab this third green on the second row, and these ones are going to be a little skinnier. So I'm going to bring my brush size down to 3%. And any place where I still have some remaining white space that feels like something needs to go there, that's where I'm going to draw these in. So I'm going to have one stem that comes down and then a couple that branch off of it. Then up at the top, I'll draw one line and then draw a bunch of lines all the way down. And this will kind of look like wheat. It just adds an additional texture to our piece. So I'm going to do the exact same thing on each branch. And it doesn't come down all the way. It stops about a third of the way down. The last little thing that we need to add in here are some punches of color. So we're going to do that with some berries. So I'm going to create a brand new layer up on top of everything. So hit the plus and we'll label this one berries. Okay, so I'm going to have 3 different colors of berries on this one, and you can separate them on different layers, but I'm just going to keep them all together for the sake of time and because they're all a very similar element. So I'm going to come over here and grab my darkest red color. I'm going to up the size of my brush all the way up to 10%. And then once again, wherever you see some white space where it just needs a little bit of something extra, where it's feeling a little bit empty, that's where you want to put in these little berry clusters. So I'll put in maybe just a couple berries here and there of the one color, and then I'll come in with some other colors. So I'm establishing where my clusters are going to be right now. Okay, switch to the second color. And once again, make sure you're changing up size too. It'll just make everything more interesting if you have some variation in scale. Okay, last color. Once you have your berries all set, now it's time to repeat everything we have right here down here. But luckily, we can use everything that we've already done. So I am going to group everything together except for the lettering. So toggle to the right, hit group, And I'm just going to label this one foliage. Okay, now that we have our foliage group, let me just tap anywhere to deselect my text. And now we're going to duplicate this. So slide it over to the left and hit duplicate, and that will duplicate this entire piece. And now this one's going to be my top foliage. So let me relabel this one top foliage. And this one's going to be my bottom foliage. So I can just tap on here. And now I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to grab my cursor and I can slide this down, and you can see if you have uniform with snapping turned on, as you move it down, it will keep it aligned. You can see those 3 lines right there, which can be really helpful. Now we're going to rotate this. So we can just flip this vertically, and then we can flip it horizontally. And I'm just going to finish dragging this down, and you can keep it as straight as you would like. That looks pretty good. Let me zoom out. I'm making sure that I don't crop these elements off the bottom, because as soon as you crop them, then they're gone for good. And we can do other things to adjust that. We don't have to crop it. So I really like the look of this. I think I want some of these elements to actually overlap the lettering, because my G right here, it's creating a large gap that I don't necessarily like. And I can rotate this a little bit too and kind of tuck it in here. And I do like that I've got some overlaps here. Let's see how that looks. I still want things to feel balanced, and I think I may need to rotate this one a little bit. That way it's more in line with my bottom one. So this is where you start tweaking and making adjustments, because obviously what's on the bottom, the design of the bottom lettering is different than the top. So we just want to make sure everything still feels really balanced here. So let me grab my top foliage and just rotate it slightly. I'm being very aware of where my S is right here. And then I don't want to crop off any elements off the top. Let's see how that looks. That's looking good. So the very last thing we're going to do is just add in some snowflakes, because the background needs a little bit of something. It's just flat color right now. So come down here to your lettering, create a brand new layer, and then drag it underneath your lettering. We'll label this one snow. So for this one, we're going to grab the 5th blue color up here, and we're going to head into our snow stamps. And you can see I've got 5 snow stamps that are part of this brush set. So you can mix and match. You can just use one type of snowflake if you'd like. It's totally up to you. I'm going to switch mine up. So I'll just start with the first one. And I like changing up the scale of these two. So I'm starting off at 6%, and I'll just stamp one, and then I'll change the size a little bit, and I'll make sure that I crop it off the edge here and there. That way it seems like it's actually falling. If they're all within the confines of our layout or our canvas, it'll not feel like the snow's actually falling. So just keep that in mind. I'm not going to put any kind of in this vicinity. This is about as close as I'm going to get to my lettering. That way I don't interfere with it too much. And I think that's good. Let's switch to another snowflake. Okay, once you have all of your snowflakes in, now I'm going to return back to my monoweight brush, and I'm just going to, let's see, I've got 10% still selected. Let's see how big that is. That looks pretty good. And I'm just going to dot around some of these open areas just to add a little bit of extra variety to my snow. And if that's feeling too bright, remember you can always reduce the opacity of your layers. So tap on the N and then just drag it down. And I think I'm going to come down to 60%. That way it's not dominating everything. So that completes project number 5 in the Procreate Holiday Greeting Series. Once again, links to everything mentioned in this tutorial, including all of those free brushes and the free color palette, are right in the video description. So just tap in there and you can have access to everything. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you can be notified of new tutorials just like this one in the future. For more Procreate tutorials and freebies, head on over to my site, every-tuesday.com. You can also find me over on Instagram. My handle is Every Tuesday. If you try this out and post it there, I would love it if you tag me. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week.